What's this? A letter for me.
Welcome to another episode of Remember the Great Sports Through the Mail Thursdays. Today I'm going to share with you some autographs that I recently got back in the mail. I've been sending out a lot of vintage requests to football and baseball players. So if you guys really enjoy vintage autographs from the 1950s and 60s, I think this video might be from you. We're going to open these three up and just see what we got and kind of go from there. So, alright. This first success is from former Detroit Tiger, St. Louis Cardinal, Bob Humphreys, and Washington Senator on 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, let me get those situated so you can see them all. And as you can see, they're signed in nice blue Sharpie, or fine blue Sharpie. Bob Humphreys, looking at his stats, he actually, I guess, would be the definition of what you would call a late bloomer. He pitched for, let's see, from 1962 to 1970 in the majors. However, the significance of him making his major league debut was that he was 27 years old when he first made his major league debut with the Detroit Tigers. Previous to that, he attended college. He was drafted out of Hampden-Sydney College, based in Virginia, where he also played his high school baseball in Virginia. After he was drafted, he spent from 1958 through 1962 in the Detroit Tigers minor league systems. It looks like he was used as a starter and a reliever, kind of a mixed match. Then in 1962, he got called up to the Detroit Tigers. He did not have very good outings with the Tigers in the 62 season in the 4 games that he was up, and actually was sold to the St. Louis Cardinals before the 1963 season. That is where he really got in the zone, I guess you would call it. In 1963 in AAA, he went 7-2 with a 1.92 ERA in 29 games as a reliever. In 1963, because of this newfound success in AAA, he did get a call up to the majors, appearing in 9 games and having a record of 0-1. So in 1964, he went into the season probably expecting to go back to AAA. However, he must have impressed somebody on the Cardinals staff, or he worked with the right coach, because in 1964, up here in the corner, that is the year the Cardinals went to the World Series and eventually won the World Series. So he was part of the 1964 Cardinals World Championship team, and that was by far his best season in the major leagues. That year, he went 2-0 with a 2.53 ERA with 28 games for the Cardinals out of their bullpen. Well, after the 64 season and winning the championship, the Cardinals decided that they wanted to trade him. So they traded him in April of 1965 to the Chicago Cubs for Hal Gilson and Bobby Fale. Well, for the Cubs, he matched that 1965 season with an awesome follow-up season, appearing in 41 games, going 2-0 again with a 3.15 ERA. Well, after that 65 season, again, he found himself traded by the Cubs to the Washington Senators. So as you can see, the Senators cards there. And these are the Washington Senators, the expansion team, because previous to that, the Minnesota Twins were the Washington Senators. So this is part 2 of the Washington Senators, we'll call it. So he played for the Washington Senators that year, and he had a very, very, very good year. Again, I guess you could argue this was probably his better season. He went 7-3 with a 2.82 ERA in his first year in Washington. So in 1966, I correct myself, I would almost beg to differ that, being that he appeared in 30 more games in 1966 and then 64, that was probably his better season. So I apologize about misleading you about his best season. But I would say in 1966 with the Senators, that was his best season. He followed up the 67 campaign with a 6-2 record, but his ERA almost doubled with a 4.17 ERA. Well, in 1968, he went 5-7, and it looks like he spent a little time in the minors for a couple games. Maybe that was an injury issue. Then in 1969, he had a 3-3 record with a 3.05 ERA. Well, despite this, I'm not really certain what transpired in 1970, but he only appeared in 5 games and had a 1.35 ERA with the Washington Senators, and they released him in mid-season in 1970. Well, he signed with the Milwaukee Brewers only a couple days after his release, and he finished the year 1970 with the Milwaukee Brewers with a 2-4 record and a 3.15 ERA. Overall, he had a 2.92 ERA, so I'm not really certain what happened there, why Washington let him go. The only thing I can think of is maybe there was an injury. With that said, the 1971 season was not so good for Mr. Humphreys, as he found himself back in AAA at the age of 35 years old, and his record was 1-2 with a 7.11 ERA. So my guess is at 34, 35, maybe there just wasn't enough left in the tank anymore, and that's why the Senators let him go. Despite being let go, he had an excellent year. So overall, Humphreys is the essential late bloomer. This is one of those guys that kind of fell under the radar for many years. He spent his time in the minors. Then all of a sudden, at 27 years old, there he was in the majors, and really found his success with the St. Louis Cardinals, and made a pretty decent career out of it. So, thank you, Mr. Humphreys. Very, very happy to add these to my collection. Okay, this next envelope is postmarked from New York, and it is a return from former, and this is coincidental, Washington Senator teammate Bob Saverine on 1, 2, 3, and a 1963 rookie card, which I thought was really nice. So Bob Saverine, this is a teammate of Bob Humphreys, actually. All right, so Saverine was a 18-year-old kid out of Connecticut, and he was drafted in 1959, and in that year he was assigned to the Baltimore Orioles D-League. So that's not a 59, but I'm just pointing out it's the Orioles. And he actually had a decent year, very good year in the D-League, batting over .350, which earned him a call-up for one game, where he appeared in one game as, it looks like, a pinch runner, because he did not have any at-bats. So, in 1959, he made his major league debut at 18 years young. The 1960, 61, and 62 season, he would spend the rest of those years playing in the minor leagues. He's basically, essentially, a utility infielder. He was a switch hitter, very useful in the field, played second base, shortstop, and even a little center field. He was nicknamed the Rabbit because I'm guessing he had some pretty good skills with his footwork, would be my guess. In 1962, he saw limited time, with the Orioles, spending the majority of his career in AAA that year. In 1963, however, he appeared in 115 games, which would be almost the most of his career. For the Orioles, and it appears that he played, some pretty decent infield. However, he only batted .234, which isn't, that great. However, his fielding percentage was very good that year. The next year, he found himself back in AAA in 1965. Did not appear in any games for the Orioles in the 65 season. However, during the 65 season, he was traded for Don Larson in April of 1965. And this is where he played in the minor leagues. However, he never appeared in a game for the Houston Astros, as he was selected in the Rule 5 draft after the 65 season. So he spent the entire season in AAA in 1965 was traded to the Astros, however never played for the Astros because he was then selected by the Washington Senators. Well, the Washington Senators more or less made him their starting infielder. He appeared in 120 games, however he only batted .251, and again had a very good fielding percentage, but I guess there were other people in their depth system that they thought would be better, a better fit at the time. He followed up the 1967 season, appearing in 89 games. In 1968, however, he was sent down to the minor leagues, and he spent the entire 1968 season in the minors, and at 27 years old, which is ironically when Bob Humphreys got to the majors, Bob Saverine decided to call it a career. All right, after the 1967 season, he did retire. I'm not really sure what he did post-playing career. Doesn't really say on his Wikipedia page. However, it does say that in 379 games, he played shortstop, third base, and all three outfield positions. He played all the positions well, but was especially good at short, where he handled 146 out of 148 chances for a fielding percentage of .986, which is immaculate. So I'm sorry I couldn't find much about what he did post-playing career. However, I am very happy to add these cards to my collection. Another Washington Senator. This is especially cool, this 63 Topps. I'm not really sure if they're, any of the other players are still alive. They're on that card, but I might, try to research them a little bit and see if maybe I can get, some of the other guys on the card to sign that. I'm just happy to get the one signed. So, all right, moving on to the next one. All right, this next one is postmarked from New Jersey, and it actually has a return address from who sent it to me, so I know exactly who this is. And this is actually, ironically, from another Washington Senator. And it is from none other than Bob Malkmus on 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, that's not it, though. This is the original Washington Senators. As I mentioned previously in the video, the Senators relocated to Minnesota, and then the expansion Washington Senators eventually moved to the Texas Rangers organization. So this is one of the original Senators. In addition to the 4 cards that he sent, there was also a oversized 1961 Topps photo. And it's just something that looks like that maybe printed out on a computer or, something to that effect that he also inscribed. He also inscribed each card with a Bible verse, which leads me to the next item I'm going to show you. And this is a pamphlet, My Greatest Thrill, signed by Bobby Malkmus. And this is a religious pamphlet. It talks about his playing career, and it also talks about his greatest thrill, which was finding God in Jesus. And this is a very cool, and there's actually his address right there. So I just did share it with you. So if you are interested in writing Mr. Malkmus, there's his address. And the reason I shared that is if you're printing it on something like this, obviously you're not afraid to share it with people. So there you go. So this is also signed. So this is actually a success 6 of 4 with these bonus items that were included. And let's talk about Mr. Malkmus's career. So, like the previous gentleman, Bob Saverine, Bob Malkmus was essentially a utility infielder type player for most of his career. He played second base, shortstop, and third base. He originally was drafted out of New Jersey high school, and he spent 1951 through 1957 in the minor leagues until he finally got his major league call-up in the 57 season. That's a 58 Topps, by the way, appearing in 13 games for the Milwaukee Braves. However, his time with Milwaukee was very short-lived, as he was drafted in the 1957 Rule 5 draft by the Washington Senators in the 1957-58 offseason. So in 1958, he appeared in 41 games for the Senators, primarily used as a backup. He'd fill in here or there. He only batted .186 that season for the 58 club. And in 1959, he only appeared in 6 total games, and that's including minor league time. So after the 58 season, he was purchased after only 6 games with the Washington Senators in the 59 season to go play in the American Association for Denver. Now, I don't know the history of the American Association that well, but I'm guessing it was more or less I don't want to say independent professional league, but probably along the lines of a professional league that was not affiliated with Major League Baseball. However, he only spent 1 year with the Washington, or with Denver that year, and in the off season, he was drafted in the Rule 5 draft again, so this guy's been drafted twice now by the Philadelphia Phillies in the Rule 5 draft. Well, in the Rule 5 draft, it stipulates basically you have to be on the Major League roster, or the team has to return you to the team of origin, so to speak. So he spent the entire 1960 season on the Major League club, appearing in 79 games, so half of their games more or less. However, in 1961, he appeared in 121 games, so the majority of the season. He started a lot of games that year. However, he only batted .231. Well, the 1962 season, he found himself primarily in the AAA affiliate for the Phillies. He only appeared in 8 games total in the 62 season at the Major League level. And then from 1963 to 1967, he appeared only in the minor leagues, never to return to the majors. Well, during the 67 season, he became a player manager in the minor leagues, and he coached in the minor leagues as a manager from 1967 to 75, compiling a winning record of 508 wins and 463 losses. After his coaching career ended in the mid-70s, he took jobs with the Cleveland Indians and the San Diego Padres as a scout. According to his Wikipedia page, he is still working in some capacity with the Cleveland Indians as of 2017. I mean, we're almost a couple years away from that, so I don't know at 88 years old how many games, he's still scouting, but, that's basically the gist of Bobby Malkmus. So, in closing, I always like to share with people the extra goodies that are thrown in the package. This is something that I think players from this era really appreciate being remembered, and a nice handwritten letter, yielded me a couple extra autographs. So, in closing, I think we have a theme video here. I want to thank you, Mr. Malkmus. I want to thank you, Mr. Saverine, and I want to thank you, Mr. Humphreys, for signing all my cards. It looks like we're going to call this the Washington Senators through the mail Thursday. So thanks for joining me for another episode, and as always, happy collecting.